In this session, I want to talk about subprograms and subroutines. I'm going to introduce new M codes, M97, M98, and M99. The M97 is basically used on a Haas machine, and that's where we call a subprogram or subroutine from within the program. An M98 is calling a subprogram outside of the main program, so you have more than one program working together. Then the M99 is always placed at the end of a subroutine or a subprogram to return back to the main. Let's see how that's done. Alright, in one of our previous lessons we talked about facing, center drilling, and tapping. And we wrote a program with multiple operations calling multiple tools, all for one part. But if you have a production run and you set up 4 different stations on the machine doing the same operation, you want to make sure that while the tool is out that you do the operation on each part. And this is a good time for you to write a M97 subroutine or create an M98 subprogram that uses the same code but machines at a different work offset, so a different location on the table. So this is what the single part process would look like. Let's take a look and see what the multiple part operation would look like on the machine, and then let's take a look at the code and how we would format it to use the same code over and over at multiple stations using M97 and M98 commands. Alright, so the first thing we do to create a subroutine or a subprogram is to assign a different work offset to the different parts on our table. Now I got them all lined up in a row here, but they may be located at random places on your table. The point here is though that the work offset has to be located at the same location on the part. So in this case the far left corner, and only then can we use the same code at each station and produce the same part. So let's start with an M97 subroutine process used on a Haas where we keep the subroutine internal to the program. Alright, so I'm showing 2 programs side by side here. Program on the left is the program that's running a single part, and you can see it calls up the face mill, then the center drill, then the drill, the peck drill, which is the minor diameter, and then we're tapping. So this is all done at one station. So now if I decide that that's a good program and I want to use the code to run multiple parts, then on the right is where I'm going to make the changes, and I'm going to start with creating a Haas program that uses subroutines, which are called with an M97. So let's talk about how that is done. So the first thing in the very top of the program, we want to make sure that the operator knows that the origin of the part is the far left corner. So it says XY origin far left corner. Alright, so each part on the table, if he has 4 vices sitting on the table, he's going to pick the far left corner and store it either in G54, G55, G56 or G57. Okay, so this is a 4-part process. So these are all messages that you want to put in the top of the program, either for you to remember or for your operator to know what he is to expect. Okay, so the program basically starts off the same with a safety line, and then we're going to make some space between the safety line and the actual milling operations. And in that space we're going to enter the M97 calls. So first of all, what we need to do is in the subroutines now, we need to take away the work offset that's called on the very first line. So for each operation, I'm going to remove the G54 that's currently there. Alright, so let's do that in 4 different places. Because we're going to use this same subroutine on 4 different parts, so we don't want that subroutine to call a work offset. Okay, we're going to activate that work offset before we get into that subroutine. So the first thing we do is create a operation description, so we just call it a face. Then we're going to activate the work offset, the first work offset for the first part we're going to be machining. Then we'll do a subroutine call with an M97, and since this is tool number 20, we're going to be looking for P2000. Now, in one of the previous videos we talked about sequence numbers, and this is where we're going to add the sequence numbers at the top of the subroutine. So this will be N2000. Then the next tool is tool number 5, so we're going to add N500. Next tool is tool 6, so N600. And then for tool number 7, this will be N700. Alright, so when we do a subroutine call, an M97 P2000, that P2000 is looking ahead in the program and is looking for an N number followed by 2000. Okay. Then on the very next line, I do an M1. That is an optional stop that allows you to stop between parts to make sure that you can measure or make sure that the moves in between parts is safe. Okay. So the very next move we're going to do is a G55 M97 P1000. So what I'm going to do is take this code here, copy it and paste it, and I'm going to do that 4 different times. Alright, so now the only thing I have to change is G54 to a G55 to a G56 to a G57. So let's talk about what happens when the M97 P2000 is called. Alright, so first of all it reads in G54, so the control now makes G54 active. It calls up the subroutine, it looks for N2000, picks up tool number 20 and does the face milling at that station. So then we jump up. We're not going to turn the spindle off nor the coolant. We're not going to home out, and there's no need for the G90. And the M1 we're going to change to an M99. So once we're done facing, we jump up to Z1 inch and then read an M99. And what the M99 does, it goes back to the very last line it read up at the top of the program, which was the M97 P1000. It goes to the very next line, which in this case is an M1 optional stop. So if M1 optional stop is active on your control, it will stop. Otherwise, it will just continue reading. If it continues reading, then it's going to go to G55. So now the G55 work offset is active. Then it calls that subroutine again. It looks for N2000 and does that operation there. Once it reads that M99, comes back to this line, reads in the G56, calls the subroutine, comes back to this line, activates G57, and then runs that face mill operation there. Then on this last subroutine call, we want to turn off the spindle here, turn off the coolant, and do a G91, G28, Z0. We want to take the spindle home, and don't forget the G90 to put it back in absolute mode. Alright, so let's go into each subprogram. Notice that this is the format we're going to need to change at the bottom of each operation. I'm going to get rid of this space here, but I'm going to copy the rapid to Z1 inch and the M99. And when I copy that, I'm going to take this whole portion right here and replace that part of the code. So all it does between operations is jump up and go back to the top portion of the program where we're managing between stations. So we are done formatting all these subroutines correctly. So the only thing we have to do now is basically add all the subroutine calls. So far all we've done is face. Okay, so to make it easy, I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole portion of the program. Yeah, I'm going to right click, copy, and then paste it right below it. Okay, so now I have two face operations, but looking back over here, the next operations is center drill. So I like them side by side so I can copy and paste from one side to the other. So I'm going to paste that right over here. Paste. Again, we're going to start at G54. Right now that's going to be calling tool number 5. So we have assigned N500 to that operation. So that P2000 will be now 500. Okay, again, I'm going to be lazy. Copy that. Paste. Paste. We'll just Control V. Paste. Okay, so basically I'm done writing that subroutine. Then I'm going to make a little space here. Then I'm going to come back up here. I'm going to copy all this. Control C. Control V. Now I look on the left side of the program. That's spec drilling. So I'm going to take this message here. Now I have a center drill up here and a center drill here. So I'm going to replace that with the minor diameter message. That is tool number 6. So this will now be 6. 6, 6, 6. So you can see once you got your format, all it takes is just copy and pasting. So now I'm going to take this section of code, Control C, Control V. The next operation here is tapping. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to replace that over here. That's tool number 7, so we know we're going to call P700 or N700. Okay, and then we come to the end of our program. So in this case, instead of the M30 being at the bottom of the program, it's at the bottom of the last subroutine. So we have already homed out in Z. We're just going to add home out in Y. And then instead of the M1, we'll call this the M30. Okay, so now everything below the M30 is actually the subroutine calls. Now make sure that you have the percent sign at the bottom and at the top. And this is how you would load the program into a Haas control, and it will be ready to run. Alright, I'm going to leave a copy of this program so that you have a good template to work with for your M97 subroutine calls. Okay? In the next video, I'm going to talk about M98 subprogram call.